For 5 years, I sat by the same window every single morning, watching the world move on without me. I'd sip my lukewarm coffee in that chipped ceramic mug, my late husband's favorite, and I'd wait, not for the mail, not for groceries, but for someone, anyone, to knock on that old wooden door and say, "We were just thinking about you," but no one ever did. My name's Evelyn. I'm 72 years old, and I live alone in the house that once echoed with laughter, Sunday roasts, and the shrieks of children playing in the backyard. Now, the silence is so loud, it hurts. I wasn't always alone, though. Once upon a time, I had a family, 2 sons, a daughter, grandchildren, and a husband who never let my birthday go by without fresh tulips and a handwritten poem that never quite rhymed, but always made me cry. But all of that faded, or maybe it was taken, slowly, one call at a time. You see, after my husband passed, things changed. Grief has a strange way of making people uncomfortable. At first, there were casseroles, visits, hugs that lingered just long enough to fool me into believing I wasn't alone. But then came the silence, texts that never got replies, calls that went straight to voicemail, birthdays forgotten, holidays missed. And me, I made excuses for them, every single time. They're busy. They've got kids. Work must be hectic. They'll come around. But 5 years is a long time to hold on to hope. I hadn't seen a single one of my children in half a decade. Not even a knock on the door. Not even when I fell in the shower and was hospitalized for 2 weeks. They found out. They just didn't come. Too far. Too much going on? Next week, maybe. I didn't even cry anymore. What's the point of tears when there's no one to see them? But then, something strange happened. About 6 weeks ago, I started giving away things. Not publicly. Quietly. Intentionally. I donated the vintage record player my husband adored to a young couple next door, who were always playing jazz through their open windows. I passed along my collection of antique teacups to a lovely nurse I met at the clinic, and I gave my wedding dress to a thrift shop with a little note inside. May it bring you a lifetime of love, like it brought me. I guess word got around. Small towns have long ears and fast mouths. Then, one Wednesday morning, while the kettle hummed and the birds chirped their usual tune, I heard something I hadn't heard in years, the sound of a car pulling into my driveway. I froze. For a second, I didn't even know what to do. Then came the knock. It was my eldest son, smiling like he hadn't ghosted me for 5 years. Arms wide open. "Mom, you look great. We were just in the neighborhood." Liar. Behind him stood his brother, my daughter, and even 2 of my grandkids who barely recognized me. They all had that same artificial warmth in their eyes, the kind that's polite, forced, the kind you wear when you want something. I invited them in. Of course I did. I'm not cruel. I'm lonely. They sat around the living room like strangers, complimenting the curtains, commenting on the weather, asking surface-level questions like, "So, how have you been?" 5 years, and that's what they lead with. Then came the moment I'd been expecting, but still hoped wouldn't come. "So, Mom," my daughter began, stirring her tea without taking a sip. "We heard you've been giving things away." And just like that, the truth was out. They hadn't come to check on me, not to apologize, not to mend anything broken. They came because they thought the vault was open and the treasure was up for grabs. But they didn't know me anymore. They didn't know what I'd been through, and they sure as hell didn't know what I had planned. I smiled, that practiced kind of smile you learn when you've spent years mastering your emotions, when you've cried too many nights alone to waste another tear on people who forgot you existed. Oh? You heard that, did you? I said, wiping my hands on my apron, calm as still water. My eldest son, Daniel, leaned forward, like he was trying to come off warm, fatherly, concerned. We were just worried, you know. You okay, Mom? Giving things away like that. Doesn't really sound like you. I looked him straight in the eyes. Well, Daniel, it didn't used to be, but a lot can change in 5 years. Wouldn't you agree? He blinked, smiled awkwardly, cleared his throat. They tried to make it sound like a welfare check, like they'd all miraculously decided, on the same random Wednesday morning, to come see their aging mother, who they hadn't visited in half a decade. But their eyes kept drifting. Not to me, but to the china cabinet, the heirloom clock, the oil painting over the mantel that had been in our family for 4 generations. Their gaze was louder than their words. I made tea. I always do. Hospitality doesn't die just because your heart's been stepped on. As I poured it, I caught my reflection in the glass. Older, yes. Softer in places, but not broken. Not anymore. So tell me, I said, setting the tray down. What brings everyone here? Really? My youngest, Emma, looked up like she'd been caught. She had always been the one who couldn't lie without her cheeks turning pink. Well, she started, we missed you. The silence that followed was heavier than any words they could have said. No one moved. Even the ticking clock on the wall sounded judgmental. I let it hang in the air a bit. You missed me, I repeated, not cruelly, just carefully. Yes, Daniel chimed in. It's just, time gets away from you, you know. 5 years worth of time? He looked down. My daughter, the one who hadn't even sent a Christmas card, suddenly remembered her coffee needed stirring again. No one said a thing. I leaned back in my chair, crossed one leg over the other, and nodded slowly. Well, you're just in time then, I said. They perked up like flowers after rain. I was actually finalizing a few things this week. Getting paperwork sorted, you know. I realized I don't need much anymore. The house, the land, the valuables. They've all just been collecting dust. I figured someone could make better use of them. And there it was. That flicker in their eyes. That hopeful gleam. They thought the doors to the kingdom were opening, and they'd just been handed the key. Daniel cleared his throat again. Well, Mom, if you ever need help with, you know, managing things, we'd be more than happy to assist. Emma nodded. We could help get things appraised, or even just keep stuff safe for you, like the family jewelry. I smiled again, but this time there was steel behind it. Oh, I'm not worried about that. Everything's already been accounted for. Their faces changed, subtle, but I noticed a shift from anticipation to confusion, concern, even. My daughter finally spoke. Accounted for? What do you mean? I mean, I said, standing up slowly and walking toward the fireplace, where a small envelope sat. I've already made arrangements, all official, witnessed, signed, sealed. I handed them the envelope, but it was empty. I just wanted to watch them scramble to read between lines that weren't even there. Emma looked up, confused. There's nothing inside. I know, I said, sitting back down. That's about what I've gotten from all of you the last few years, isn't it? Silence. I don't say that to be bitter, I continued, but let's not pretend we're something we're not. You didn't come here because you missed me. You came because you thought I was about to hand out pieces of a life you had no part in maintaining. No one argued, because there was nothing to argue. I'm not mad, I said, after a moment. Not anymore. I've already grieved. First your father, then the version of you I thought you'd be. Daniel looked pained. Mom, we're here now. Can't we move forward? Are you here because you want to be? Or because you think I'm about to give you something? They didn't answer. Didn't need to. I stood again and walked over to the window, my familiar spot. Outside, the same world kept spinning. But inside, something had finally settled. I've spent 5 years waiting, I said softly, waiting for one of you to show up, not because you wanted something, but because you missed me. Not because you heard rumors, but because you remembered. I turned back to them. But that never came. So I made peace with it. And then I made plans. They were still confused, waiting for the punchline, for the list of assets, for the big reveal. And it was coming. But not the one they expected. I walked to the cabinet, the same one they had all glanced at with such quiet greed, and opened the bottom drawer. From it, I pulled out a set of neatly bound folders and placed them gently on the coffee table. They stared at them, like they were waiting for a magician's reveal. These, I said, are the donation papers, transfer deeds, gifting agreements. Emma leaned in. Donation? What? Kind of donation? I smiled again, that slow, quiet smile. I've decided to give everything away, but not to you. The air cracked like ice underfoot. I spent years thinking about who deserved it. And you know what? There are so many people out there who showed me more kindness, more love, more presence, complete strangers, than my own children did. I tapped the folders. That land behind the house, it's going to be a community garden, managed by a local nonprofit that helps struggling families grow their own food. The furniture and heirlooms, donated to the Historical Society. The house, this very house, is being handed over to a shelter for abused women and children. Somewhere safe, somewhere where new stories can begin. Daniel looked like someone had punched the wind out of him. You're giving away everything? I nodded. Yes, everything but a few keepsakes I'll carry with me. Emma's voice cracked. But, Mom, we're your family. I looked at her with a softness that surprised even me. And family shows up. Family calls. Family checks in. Family doesn't disappear until there's something to gain. They didn't know where to look. Shame is loud in a quiet room. You see, I continued, I've lived long enough to realize that inheritance isn't something you receive because of blood. It's something you earn through love, loyalty, and time. I sat back down, calm, a storm that had already passed. I waited. I hoped. But eventually, I stopped waiting and started living. And in doing so, I met incredible people. I volunteered. I laughed again. I found new purpose. And most importantly, I found myself. The woman who existed before the apron, before the motherhood, before the years of giving until there was nothing left. Daniel clenched his jaw. You're punishing us. No, I said. I'm freeing myself. And I meant it. I wasn't doing this out of spite. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation of my time, my energy, my story. I know this hurts, I said, gentler now. But maybe that hurt will teach you something about presence, about showing up. Maybe it'll make you better people, better parents, better humans. They didn't speak. What could they say? For 5 years, I had birthdays with silent phones, holidays with empty chairs, hospital visits without visitors. And now, they arrived with open hands and hollow words. But I wasn't angry anymore. That's the thing they didn't understand. I'd already let them go. I had already done the grieving. This was just the goodbye they never expected. I poured myself another cup of tea, unshaken, while they sat stunned. "Will you still let us visit?" Emma whispered. "Of course," I said. "The door is always open, but come with your hearts, not your hands." They looked down, perhaps for the first time, seeing me not as their mother, but as a woman who had lived and learned. "I don't want your apologies," I said softly. "I just want you to grow." And with that, I stood, walked to the back door, and opened it wide. The sun streamed in, bright and golden. "I'm going for a walk," I said, as calmly as ever. "You're welcome to stay, or to find your own paths. Just remember, time is a gift. Don't waste it like you did with me." And I stepped out, breathing in the spring air, free in a way I hadn't been in decades. Behind me, I left not just a house, but a message, one I hoped they'd carry long after the tea went cold. As I stepped into the sunlight, something shifted inside me. It wasn't just relief, it was something deeper, like I'd peeled off the final layer of something heavy I didn't know I was still carrying. The breeze touched my skin like a blessing, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. I walked down the same cracked pathway I'd used 100 times to get the mail or pull weeds from the front yard. But this time, I wasn't just walking. I was leaving. I didn't go far. Just a few blocks over was a cozy little community center I'd started volunteering at a couple of years ago. It was filled with people who smiled when they saw me, who asked how my day was going, not because they wanted anything from me, but because they genuinely cared. There was Gloria, the retired librarian, who always brought her famous banana bread. David, a war veteran with shaky hands and a strong heart. And Maria, a single mother who came to knit blankets while her daughter read books in the corner. These were the people who had slowly, without fanfare, stitched a sense of belonging back into my life. When I walked in that day, Maria was the first to notice. "You okay?" she asked, pausing mid-row in her knitting. I smiled. "More than okay." David looked up from his newspaper and raised an eyebrow. "You look lighter." "I finally said goodbye to some ghosts," I replied, "and they didn't ask for details. They didn't need to. They just nodded, like people who understood what that meant." We spent the afternoon sorting donations and sharing stories. Gloria told one about her late husband getting stuck in a kayak. I laughed so hard, my side hurt. That laugh wasn't for anyone's benefit. It wasn't performance. It was real. Later that week, I visited the women's shelter that would soon take over my house. It was run by a group of fierce, compassionate women, many of whom had once been residents there themselves. When I showed them the property, I saw tears in their eyes. They walked the halls like they were imagining futures inside them. One woman turned to me, her voice trembling. "Do you know what this will mean to them?" I nodded. "Yes, because I know what it means to be forgotten." And in that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. This house wasn't meant to be a shrine for those who abandoned me. It was meant to be a sanctuary for those who needed love more than anything. A few days later, I received a letter, handwritten, neat cursive. It was from Daniel. "Mom, I don't know if you'll read this, but I wanted to try. I've been thinking a lot since we visited. You were right. We were selfish. We stayed away because it was easy, because we thought you'd always be there. We didn't realize that showing up is what makes love real. I can't change the past, but I'm going to try to be better. For my kids, for myself. I hope you'll let me earn your trust back. Not for what you own, but for who you are. I'm sorry, truly." I sat with the letter for a long while, letting the words settle. They were late, but they were honest. And sometimes, that's the best you can ask for. I didn't rush to respond. I wasn't angry, just cautious. I knew now that love needed more than letters. It needed consistency. It needed presence. So I kept going. I started taking watercolor classes at the center. My hands, stiff with age, slowly found rhythm in color. I painted memories I hadn't thought about in decades. I painted emotions I couldn't put into words. I painted peace. I went on trips with the center, small road trips to neighboring towns, where we laughed too loud in diners and took pictures like teenagers. I relearned how to be, not as someone's mother or someone's widow or someone's once useful matriarch, but just as Margaret. I even reconnected with an old friend, Helen, from college, who I hadn't spoken to in nearly 30 years. She'd lost her husband too. We had long coffee chats where we cried and laughed and talked about the wild things we never got to do. And we made a list of them. One by one, we started crossing them off. We went to a jazz club and danced until midnight, ignoring the stares. We took a train just to watch the trees change color in the mountains. We even got matching tattoos, tiny birds on our wrists. "Freedom," she said, grinning. "Finally," I answered. One morning, as the sun filtered through my window and birds chirped softly outside, I sat at my little kitchen table, no longer cluttered with unopened mail or old medicine bottles, and began writing something I never thought I would. A will, but not the kind you'd think. Not one about money or real estate. I'd already given the house away. This was more like a legacy letter, a map of my heart, written down for whoever might one day care enough to read it. It started simple. To anyone who ever wondered what became of the woman in the big old house on Maple Drive. Here's the truth. I waited. For 5 long years, I waited. And then I stopped. And once I stopped waiting, I started living. I wrote about my disappointments, yes, but I also wrote about my growth, about how loneliness had carved me out, but somehow made room for new, unexpected joys. I wrote about how pain isn't the end of the story. Sometimes it's just the middle. And I wrote something for each of my children, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Daniel, you were always my gentle boy. I saw the way life hardened you, and I mourned it. I hope one day you let softness back in, not for me, but for you. Rachel, you were fire and sharp edges, and I adored your strength. But I wish you'd known that strength doesn't mean silence. Sometimes it means saying, "I miss you," even when pride screams louder. And Eli, my baby, you were so young when your father died. I know you don't remember the way I held everything together back then, but I hope, one day, when you struggle under the weight of being a grown-up, you'll understand I was always doing my best. It wasn't about guilt, it was about truth. And the truth, I found, could be so liberating. Later that week, I invited a few people from the center over for dinner, just a small gathering. I made baked ziti and garlic bread and a lemon pie I hadn't made in years. We ate, laughed, and played a ridiculous trivia game that Gloria kept cheating at, though we all pretended not to notice. At one point in the evening, as the laughter died down, David looked at me and said, "You know, Margaret, you've become kind of the heart of this place." I blinked, surprised. "Me?" He nodded. "You gave us more than just your house. You gave us you, and you're more than enough." That night, after they'd gone home, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself fully. Wrinkles, silver hair, soft lines around my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I didn't wish I looked younger. I didn't wish I was younger, because every year, etched into my face, was proof. I'd survived. I'd learned. I'd loved. And despite everything, I hadn't given up on people. I'd just chosen better ones. A few weeks later, Rachel reached out. A hesitant phone call. "Hi, Mom," she said. "I don't know if you even want to talk to me." I sat down, slowly. "I do. I really do." We didn't talk about the house. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about her new job, her son's science fair, the book club she just joined. She asked how I was, and for the first time, I had more to say than fine. We started speaking every few days after that. No promises, no grand declarations, just a slow rebuilding. The kind you don't notice until one day, you realize the cracks don't show as much anymore. Daniel sent photos of his kids playing in the snow. One had my smile. Eli sent a postcard from Spain. "Thinking of you," it read. That was all. But it was enough. And me? I kept living. I took up gardening again. This time, not because I had to maintain a house, but because I wanted to feel dirt in my hands and life growing from it. I planted marigolds and lavender, tomatoes and basil. And every morning, I'd walk out, coffee in hand, and talk to the plants like old friends. Sometimes, when a breeze would pass through and the chimes on the porch would sing, I'd imagine my husband there, smiling at me, proud of what I'd become. Not just a wife, not just a mother, but me, whole, strong, enough. A year passed, then another. The old house that once echoed with silence now hummed with life, not because of blood ties or legacy, but because of kindness, connection, and second chances. The little community center thrived. Movie nights, art classes, shared meals, even a small garden out back that the kids tended to in the summer. People came and went, but something about the place. It felt safe. It felt like home. I wasn't rich, not in the way my children had assumed, but I was rich in ways they hadn't taken time to understand. I had love. I had laughter. I had peace. That was wealth enough for me. Then, one quiet afternoon, just as the golden light of late spring poured through the lace curtains, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it slowly, and there they were, all three of them, my children, standing on the porch, not with suitcases, not with excuses, but with awkward, hesitant smiles. There were tight hugs, a few silent tears, nervous laughter. Eli looked taller. Rachel had more gray in her hair than I remembered. Daniel's shoulders slouched like the weight of years had finally caught up to him. "Hi, Mom," Rachel said softly. "We heard you were giving everything away." I nodded, calm and still. "I did. I gave the house away a while ago." They looked at one another, confused, unsure. But Daniel stepped forward, his voice shaking slightly. "We thought, maybe, you had something left. Something for us." I looked at them, long and hard, and then I said it, gently, but without apology. "I do, but it's not what you think." I led them inside. The center was alive with voices and footsteps, the smell of something baking in the kitchen, soft music playing from someone's phone. Volunteers were stacking books on a shelf. Gloria waved from a corner, giving them a side eye that made me stifle a chuckle. We sat at a round table. No grandeur, no ceremony, just a mother and her grown children, eye to eye. "I spent a lot of years hoping you'd show up," I said, my voice steady. "Birthdays passed, holidays. I made meals you never ate and saved stories you never asked to hear. And I won't lie, it hurt." I saw their faces shift. Shame, regret, that hollow ache that comes when you realize you missed something you'll never quite get back. "But," I continued, "those years weren't wasted. They taught me what matters, and what I was clinging to wasn't really about things. It was about being seen, being remembered, being loved." I reached into my bag and pulled out 3 envelopes, one for each of them. Inside, each was a letter, handwritten, honest, messy, full of memories and moments and truths I'd never had the chance or courage to say aloud. Not accusations, not blame, just pieces of me, offered with an open hand and a key. Each key opened a small locker at the community center. Inside, a photo album, a handmade quilt stitched with pieces of their childhood clothes, a CD with old family videos digitized. Not wealth, but legacy, the real kind. Rachel's eyes welled up. Eli just stared at his envelope. Daniel swallowed hard, blinking fast. "You thought I was giving away everything," I said softly. But what I was really doing was giving away everything that didn't matter, so I could make space for what did. They stayed a while, helped in the garden, ate a warm meal with the volunteers, listened to stories from the people they'd once ignored. I watched them, silently, heart full and trembling. They didn't leave with money, but they left with something deeper. A mirror, a chance, a truth. Weeks later, I sat on the porch as twilight fell, and the fireflies began to dance. I rocked gently, the wood creaking beneath me, a cup of tea in hand. Sometimes life doesn't give you the ending you hoped for, but sometimes, if you're patient, it gives you something better, a beginning. Not everyone will understand your worth when it matters most, but that doesn't make you less worthy. And if, one day, those who forgot you come back smiling when they think you're giving away everything, let them. Because by then, if you've done the work, you'll have already given yourself the one thing they were too late to offer: peace.